The Godswood had always kept a different time than the rest of Winterfell. Even when the yard bustled and the bellows sang in Micken's forge and dogs bayed after the butchers, when carts creaked through the gatehouse and the great hall swelled with laughter and the smell of stewing onions, the grove around the heart tree breathed in a slower measure. The red leaves hung still as a listening hand. The white bark glistened with beads of melt where the hot springs sent up their ghostly vapors in thin ropes, and the pool at the base held the sky with a seriousness that made a man watch his words. Eddard Stark stood beneath the carved face and counted his heartbeats for the first time in many weeks, and felt all the differences between then and now. The hard line of a scar a finger's breadth below his jaw where a blade had pressed and not fallen. The ache in the knee from a hurried night of flight concealed in a cart of oaten straw, the heavy quiet of decisions not yet made. There were crows in the elm beyond the wall, fat as their own stories, clucking to one another, and somewhere not far off a boy's laugh skittered and was gone, swallowed by the frost-still air. Ned watched a pale leaf tumble like a coin cast into the pool. He could smell the iron and the leaf mold and the clean, cold springs that made Winterfell a warm place inside itself even when the winds were keen enough to scour a man's bones. Home. He put a hand to the rough bark below the face, its mouth carved downturned, its eyes bleared red by sap, as if the tree grieved through him and for him. Father! He did not turn at once. Catelyn's voice arrived gently and he let it, as if sound were a bird that might startle away if acknowledged too quickly. Then he looked and found her between the trunks, wrapped in a cloak the color of river stones. A cowl pulled over her hair. She had walked here without haste, the way she had as a girl on the banks of the Tumblestone, he thought. There was a steadiness in her that the years and grief and strange roads had not pared down. "The kitchen thinks you've forgotten hunger," she said. "I promised them I would fetch you back to your porridge." "Poor Ride is patient," he said, and the old word slipped out as if Ariel the cook still presided over his belly and his boyhood. Her mouth softened at that, and her hand took his wrist below the scar and held him as if she could warm through his sinew into the ache of decision, the ache of remembrance. "Luwin is right," he added. "There are too many mouths to feed for me to insult the porridge." "The porridge will forgive even a lord," she said. "Maester Luwin would have you at his table as well. There is a letter from White Harbor, and 2 from the Neck, and 1 in a hand I would swear I saw once at Riverrun, though the seal is not of Riverrun. The harbor." His eyes went to the pool. The leaf had settled with a stubborn little tremble. "Has Wyman finally sent what he promised?" "He sends more than we asked, and a question gentled by courtesy," Catelyn said. The cowl shadowed her eyes and made him think of all the candles that had burned down in strange chambers while she awaited news of him. "There is talk of a ship from Braavos, and of a company of pale strangers who bow too often and say too little. And there are said to be 3 leathers thrown over the backs of beasts no man of his harbor knew enough to name, though they knew fear. Wyman uses a careful tongue. He says, 'The city has heard tales,' and he asks whether he should treat a queen like a guest or like a storm." Ned felt the gods would lighten behind his eyes, as if the white face had tilted. A queen. In the south, all queens had Lannister hair and long fingers that held suns and promises as if both were coins that could be melted down to buy new steel. He had escaped the last of their coin only by a trick that had not been his own. He could taste that narrowness even now. Another queen, across the sea and in a tongue he had never spoken, was a tale the boys told in the yard to frighten each other pleasantly at night. It smelled of wine and stories and sailors. And yet, since his return, ravens had flown in with their little black knives of script, cutting new shapes around old names. Rumors were great harbors where the sea was shallow. A man could ground on them if he took them for deep water. He looked at Catelyn. He knew the set of her mouth when she kept back the sharpest thing her heart wished to say. "Not a storm, then," he said as if the word itself might conjure rain. "A guest until we know the rest of it. Wyman will dress a guest in candied words, even if the guest is heat and fire and this winter's equal. He says, too," she went on, "that one of the pale men wore a sigil of 3 heads on a red field. It was not painted as it is often painted. He swears there was no black to it, only a deep color like blood in snow. He is a man for sauces and careful words, but he is not careless with what he sees. He puts his own name to it, a Targaryen seal. There were fires that never cooled all the way, even in the north. How swiftly memory turned on its heel and looked down on him with a younger face. Lyanna's laughter under a summer sky, a silver prince whose music had pierced him like a spearhead. The smell of smoke and roses on a night he had sometimes thought he had imagined in another life. There were promises that could not be unmade, and promises that should have been unmade long ago and were not. He closed his hand on the bark and felt the tree answer in no way at all. "I will see Luwin," he said, "and then I will go to the rookery with him. Wyman shall have his answer before sunset." "And the porridge?" she asked. The Riverstone cloak bent close enough that he could find the skin he had kissed and the scar near her wrist that only he knew. He breathed. He had not held her like this since his return from the south. There had been too many eyes and he had too many rooms to walk through in his head. "The porridge can wait," he said, and his mouth found hers. And for a moment there was no seal upon any letter except the older seal of their marriage, and even the crows beyond the wall might have been far ships up the white knife. The day colored itself in the ordinary work of a lord with a house to spare him and a winter to bind them all together. Maester Luwin met him in the solar with a stack of slates and the letter from White Harbor. The old chain clicked softly when he lifted his chin. A clean quill stood ready in a jar, though his hand went to the older penknife by habit. There was comfort, Ned had found, in men who had changed little in the years between wars. "Lord Wyman's words," Luwin said, "are as measured as you would expect. He is generous in such things as do not prick him, and careful where they might. He writes of strangers who call the sea by names it does not have in the city. He writes of a scale the color of old bronze that a fisher boy brought to the gatehouse as if it were a coin. He writes of a shadow over the merman's court large enough to make men fall to their knees and pray to gods they had nothing to do with the day before. The fear did not last longer than the shade," he says, which suggests something smaller than tales would have. "But fear is quicker than truth." "A scale," Ned said. "It arrived wrapped in waxed cloth," Luwin said, and when he unwound it, the light from the narrow window made the thing in his hand seem like a piece of sunset torn off and hardened. It was no ordinary fish armor. The curve of it fit no salmon. It looked old in a way that suggested it was new to them alone. Ned held it, and the weight said something implacable, and the color said heat. "One of the messengers from the neck is dead," Luwin added softly when Ned had made himself put the scale down. "He had nothing to do with this thing from the sea. He had a fever, but his companion brings word that the marsh folk are restless. Reeds whisper when the wind has something to tell them. There are bands of men in mail on the Green Fork who belong to no lord the neck recognizes. They have no banners worth naming, or they hide them. And this," he set his finger on the last letter, "this is the one I cannot place. A small, neat hand, and the seal is 3 drops of red wax. It was carried not by Raven but by a man who would not enter the hall, who spoke the tongue as well as I do but called me Maester, as if he had learned to taste the word from a different well. He asked for a cup of milk and drank it like a man from a place where milk is too precious to waste. He said his message was for you alone." Ned read sitting, because his knees did not trust the weight of such a day. The small neat hand wrote quickly and without flourishes. It said what it would say and left breathing room around each word. "Wyman waits upon your judgment, Lord Stark, and so do we." The letter named no queen, but it named 3 living fires and called them hungry as children. It said, "The south tears itself to ribbons while the east remembers itself." It said, "The prince laid roses before a grave he did not yet know was dug, but the daughter has no such careless hands." It said only once the name Daenerys and made of it a small thing in the sentence, a word like any other, as if to teach him not to flinch when he saw it. He was very still when he gave the letter back to Luwin. The Maester had his respect, had it again and again, and deserved no less. But there were matters that could not be ground down fine among bread and slates. They had to be broken open with a hammer and left to weather. "Send to Lord Wyman," he said at last, "that he may receive these strangers with all courtesy due any ship bearing a crown. He will not pledge here or there until I stand in his hall. He will house them and feed them and give them ale. He will not show them the keys to the city's gates or the count of his ships. Tell him I will come to him as soon as the storehouses are tallied, and I have seen to certain errands that were mine before these letters came. And he must hold his hand as steady as a man setting a razor to a lord's throat. He will understand your meaning, Luwin said. He writes as a man who understands many such meanings. And to the neck, Ned went on. Send word that no host shall tramp the green fork with northern bread in their bellies who have not named their lord and their purpose to the reeds. We will not have more Southron wars crossing our marshes like foxes left to breed in the henhouse. To those who do not answer, the marsh folk may make a discouragement of their choosing. But caution them that every dead man leaves a family behind him like stones in a field. We will not set our own feet bloody if we can help it. And the small, neat hand? Luwin asked. Burn a sliver of birch in the rookery hearth and send back the ash in a pouch with a string of good northern wool, Ned said. Make no mark but a wolf. There will be those who know what we mean by that, and there will be those who do not. Let us hope the ones who do are the ones who should. Luwin inclined his head. I will, my lord. They ate the porridge in the end, and it was as patient as porridge could be, with raisins and a ribbon of cream and a string of salt like a memory of the sea. After, Caitlin went to speak with old Nan in her little chamber near the laundry, where steam drifted and blankets breathed damply on their lines. Old Nan's tales traveled faster than letters, and sometimes their wisdom was the better for not bearing a seal. Ned took himself to the yard and watched the boys make a clatter of themselves under the master-at-arms' eye. Bran had not taken to the wooden sword with the joy Robb had. There was more winter in Bran and more thought. He sat now on the rampart with his legs dangling and talked solemnly to a raven perched on the parapet as if it understood dignity. Rickon had a stick, and a wild dog's way with it, and shouted as he struck, and the stable boys laughed the laugh of boys who adore a little lord and delight in not being him. Theon was there, loose-hipped and pleased with himself as always, trying his new wolf's head dagger on a post and making bets with the sons of servants about whether he could slice a hanging apple without nicking the rope. He looked at Ned once, and for a heartbeat there was a boy's thanks in his grin. Thanks for a meal, a cloak, a memory of a safer night. Then something armored slid over it. The sea had raised Theon, not Winterfell. The sea did not forget itself easily. Lord, Theon said later, when the yard had turned to gray-blue and the smithy threw a red face against the snow. He fell into step as if they had arranged it. Shall we ride out to the hunters' huts tomorrow? A man told me he saw Prince their last eve that he did not know. Big as a haunch of mutton, he said, like a cat had grown wise enough to wear a horse's shoes. We will ride day after next, Ned said. Tomorrow I need men to bring in venison for the tables and peat for those rooms that want it. A lord's ride is meat for a supper, not a meal for the winter. Theon laughed as if this were a jest. Wiser than a cat, he said. The men will follow, and I'll see the peat cut. There's a cold in the stones I don't remember from last winter, and old Nan says it's because the dead are nearer. She always says that when her bones ache. If we could find this clever cat, though, it would make a fine pelt over the high seat when the southern lords come to kneel. He said it with his jesting face, but his eyes flicked as if to find whether Ned would correct him. Southern lords coming to kneel. No pelt on that seat has ever made a man kneel, Ned said. Any man who kneels in my hall does so because he keeps his own word. Theon hummed, a swift sound and gone. When he had sauntered off toward the warmth and laughter of the kitchen, Ned stood a moment with the snow creaking under his boots, and looked out past the gray stones of the wall toward the dark of the godswood. The air smelled of pine and iron and something else he could not name, a hint of burnt sugar and hot coin, and he did not know whether that was memory or fresh wind. They sent ravens. They always sent ravens. Black wings beat the cold air and made more of it, and words went above wolves and travelers, above the splash of the white knife as it banged its shoulder against the stones, above spears of hoarfrost thorned on the morning. One of those wings crossed the jagged miles to Castle Black and dropped down among other wings and the comfort of dung and hay, where John stood with his bare head in the cold and watched the bird pull its crop down to the letters bound to its leg. He recognized the hand before he recognized the seal. Llewellyn's letters always wore a certain humility, as if the maester apologized in advance for copying out grim news. The seal was a running direwolf pressed into brown wax that flaked under the raven's claw. He broke it carefully so he would not waste any of the past that lay in it. "My son," the first line said, and below that, "Your father is safe in Winterfell." Words made for a child to receive in a nursery, not a man grown to oaths and a cold bed. John read it again, and the breath went out of him and would not return, as if some hand had come up through the ice and slid around his ribs. He was aware of Samwell Tarly, hands moist, eyes anxious, aware of Tywin coughing and swearing softly in his beard, of the other boys making the sounds young men make when something larger than they know passes near them. A quick hush and a glance and the need to speak of it loudly later to make it manageable. He was aware of the old bear standing in the doorway to his chamber with his hands behind his back and his eyes like a man who squints into a stubborn wind. "He lives?" Sam whispered, unable to keep the happiness from turning his voice into a bird. "John, he lives." "He lives?" John said, and hearing his own voice say it, he felt a savage, impolite joy that made him want to run until he fell down in the drifts and let the cold punish him for it. He smoothed the letter and read on. There was no foolishness in Llewellyn's words. He did not write as if to a child, except for the first line. He wrote of shortages of brass and of a rumor at White Harbor that would have made John laugh 3 days ago and did not now. He wrote of Bran smiling more and sleeping less, of Rickon biting 2 boys in a squabble over a horn spoon, of the dogs being fat and proud enough to swagger. He did not write of Arya or Sansa, and where a name should be there was a space like a chair left empty at a feast. "Take your time," the old bear said when John folded the letter once again and slid it into his sleeve. "And your breath. Then come and tell me what you must out of it. I won't drag a boy away from his father's voice." "I am not a boy," John said quietly, because the words felt required. The old bear's beard twitched as if he would have smiled if he were a kinder man, or less honest. "No," he said, "you are not. Go on. Put your heart where it belongs and then come back and put it where you swore to keep it. They are not the same room, and a man can walk between them if he knows his own feet." Later, in the dim warmth of the Lord Commander's rooms with the smell of old tea and old leather and a stew that had given everything it had to the air and no longer had much left for the spoon, John told him. He said the words of his father's safety and felt as if he were peeling off a scab. He said the words of the rumor from the harbor and felt the odd excitement that had run through the courtyard when the raven hopped down and screamed. Dragons. The word was a toy that had teeth. It generated its own heat when a man turned it over in his mouth. 3, the old bear said. He looked down into the bowl he held. The gods give. Ye men their tests like pennies sometimes, but sometimes they heap them up like crowns. 3 dragons where we already have more kings than we can count on a man's hands. H&H. What would you do? John asked, reckless with wanting answers as if the old man could bottle sense and hand it over. If dragons flew north to this wall and lit upon it like crows, I would ask them to piss on the wind to keep my men warmer at their watch, the old bear said. And when they did not laugh at that, I would do what I always do when anything new comes to the world. I would keep my back against stone and look it in the eye until it told me what it wanted. John left him to his stew. He folded Llewellyn's letter into the small box of things he kept that were not necessary for his oath but necessary for his heart. An old ribbon from his sister's hair, a pebble from the wolfswood, the stub of a parchment with a childish drawing of a wolf. He went out into the hard gray light and looked over the ice of the wall out at the haunted, quiet miles. The wind rasped the hair back from his face as if it wanted to take it all together and leave him scalped and numb. He put his hand on the ice as if that could convert Jesus's words into a new sense, and he whispered a thank you to gods he did not know how to name. The ravens above him disagreed with one another in their harsh voices as if they were masters of politics. He smiled, and the smile hurt in places he had not known he could feel. When Ned rode east with a small company, he did so without fanfare. He left Robb's old banner wrapped and tied. He wore no crown. He remembered too well what crowns did to men, and what men did around crowns. The great John had begged to make the journey rough with the numbers of his men and the volume of his laughter, but Ned chose 5 stout riders, 3 spears and Harwin, whose seat was as natural on a horse as a river lies in its bed. Theon came without being asked and wore his best cloak and his dagger and his grin as if they were all of a set. Catelyn had to stay. There were layers of sureness that Winterfell needed now more than ever, and her hands had the sense for those knots. They kissed once in the yard under a sky that had gnawed off half its clouds. "Do not be an old story," she said, the words simple as bread and as heavy. "I have always been a quiet one," he said, but that was not an answer. He turned his horse. Bran and Rickon stood on the stones, side by side, like 2 apples from different harvests. Bran raised a hand, Rickon shouted something about bringing back a giant's tooth, and Ned laughed because the sound put courage in men, and because courage is sometimes like a cloak, a thing you can put on and be warmed by even if the weather does not respect it. The road was honest about its flaws. It threw stones into their horses' shoes and made complaining noises over marshy places where the frost had lifted and lowered itself again. On the 2nd day, a deer kept pace with them in a thicket, ears flicking, as if it had once been a courtier and still bore the habit of attending on men. On the 3rd, the air changed. Harwin smelled it first. "Salt," he said, "and fish and tar. The sea's in a mood." "The sea is often in a mood," Theon said, scornful in the way of men for whom the sea was a mother. "You can tell nothing by that." "I can tell we will have rain before we see White Harbor," Harwin said, "which means I will ride in wet breeches and curse the day I was born until Lord Wyman's cooks forgive me." They saw the harbor next day through a veil of rain that hung like bead curtains from the low sky. The city was always a contradiction in the north. White and fair and southern at a glance with its carved stone and its masts and its markets, and yet northern beneath with its stubborn thick walls and its people who could talk both a lord out of a jewel and a sailor out of his last warm place to sleep. Flags dripped. Nets dripped. The mermen carved on the gates looked as if they had just come up from drowning and were not sure they regretted it. The smell of fish was a religion in itself here. Men bowed. Women bowed. A boy ran backward for 30 feet because he did not want to have to turn his back on Ned and risk missing a story of his own retelling later. Wyman Manderley received him as the letter had promised, with enough food to shame a war, and enough courtesy to make war impossible in the hall at least. He was as large as ever, and the rings on his fingers were so many that when he set one hand to the arms of his chair, it looked like a merchant had left his stall there by accident. The chamber was hung with tapestries of seas and ships, and the fire burned as if it were proud of itself. "My lord," Wyman said when they were private, "I have had small opportunities in my life to bring news to a man who would not speak altars and feasts and gifts around it. So I will say it plain as a priest says death. A girl who calls herself queen has dragons, and one has been above our roofs." Fish fell silent in their barrels. Children ran without knowing where they meant to go. Old men forgot to pretend they no longer cared about stories. It was not a beast the size to eat a whale. It was a young thing as a dog is a young wolf. But its breath is a knife you could shave with. Ned felt the old bones of the world shiver under the floor. He had never expected to live to hear that word spoken by a man he trusted over bread, not as a fantasy, but as an account. It did no harm? It stole 2 of old Hullen's sheep on the east side, Wyman said without hesitation. He was a good lord in this, telling both glories and inconveniences at once. It scorched a cart full of peat bales as if to teach us not to heap them so untidily. It shrieked as if it had wisdom and was offended by how we used our days. Then it flew back where we could not see, and then a ship's master from Bravos made a speech to me in the court and bowed enough times to make me reach for a stool for him. There is a man from the east with them, pale hair and a beard like a sliver of frost. It was he who wore the dragon on his breast. There is another man too, who did not step into the court but kept to the shadows under the balcony because my men had eyes and memory enough to know him. If it is to be spoken, it ought to be spoken first in this room and not in the market. He looked at Ned, and the look was both apology and assistance. Ser Jorah Mormont, Wyman said, "who has little right to his sir off this leash of a queen, and less right to our salt." He stood where he thought nobody would see him. "But he is the Eastern Queen's man, if my men read his shadow rightly." Ned let a breath go. The threads of the past had been tugging for days. Now he saw which ones had moved the rest. Yora had been a name often in the air when Midge Mormont drank. She had wanted him hanged once in this hall. He had disgraced the North by selling men. He had fled south. He had fled east. Now he crept back with a dragon. "Bring him," Ned said, and held Wyman's gaze until the fat lord of White Harbor nodded. Theon shifted his weight beside the fire and tried to make his grin mean nothing, as if smiles had no loyalties. They met in a chamber that looked out over the narrowing river, where ships leaned in toward the quays like horses coming to water. The rain had wandered off to another city. White Harbor glistened like a seal's back. Yora Mormont came in with a man whose hair did look like frost, and whose face was broad and sure and marked with a scar that would never be a lord's. Yora knelt. He had been handsome in a way that the hall liked once. Now he looked like a man who had traveled enough to leave pieces of himself at every inn. He kept his eyes down until Ned spoke. "Rise," Ned said. "If the gods have not executed you, they have spared that labor for me. I hear you have dragons now to keep you from the noose." Yora rose. He took the insult like rain. "I hoped to keep them from you, my lord. I am harder to burn than oiled wool," Ned said. "You are bold to come." The frost-haired man said something soft in a language the room did not own. Yora made a gesture with one hand as if to say, "Let me. I come to you because I was yours once," Yora said. He gestured at his breast. His chain was plain, his tunic good cloth. The little dragon on the Bravosi's neck was of beaten copper. "I betrayed your trust and the law besides. I fled it. I found another law in another place, and I kept it. The woman I serve keeps to her word better than any king I have seen in Essos or this land. She is young. She is not the man who burned your father. She is not a song. She is a woman who wakes early and eats little and counts her friends carefully and her enemies more carefully. She does not know your lands. She does not pretend to, but she knows the south is sick, and the sickness runs where the kings eat. She knows you are a man who does not laugh at a man's death. She knows. I told her you were the one North Lord who could say no to a pretty story. She sent me because she will not walk blind where she cannot fly. She is across the sea," Ned said. He had meant to say she is a tale, but there were scales and sheep and peat bales and a shadow on a court that had shut the mouths of fish. "How then does White Harbor see her beasts?" "She sent one small one to see whether the world would tear itself to reach it," Yora said simply. "She cared for it as if it were a child. But she is not a mother who would send her sons into a bramble for nothing. If men shot at it from the rooftops as at a witch, if men drowned it as if it were a cat, then she would know what men in the far west do with gifts. Instead, the city looked up and remembered it had a neck. She thinks there may be a path through the winter that does not involve eating all your own bread at the beginning. She thinks your honor might not be a noose around your own neck this time, my lord. She thinks." The frost-haired man spoke then, his Bravosi accent careful and his words not those of a court. "She thinks to live," he said, "and to help you live. The Lannisters would have your breath if you gave them the right day. They would have it for less, for a lesson, for a morning. The Southern wars are children's fights with Father's knives. The irons and the ships and the coin move where men are foolish enough to touch them. She has beasts to set against theirs. She has men who know how to take a city by taking the water that feeds it. She wants to know this. Does the wolf wish to be left alone in the snow? Or does he wish to eat?" "I wish not to starve," Ned said. He felt tired down to the marrow and upright at the same time. He had not slept since he was a young man when so much hung off a single noon. "The South has one of my daughters. Another is missing somewhere between the river and the crown. My sons are here and smile and think the world cannot change when their father does not. The last time dragons flew over this land, the kings burned like driftwood. I have no love for men who melt iron thrones with their breath. But I have less for men who hold my child's life like a coin between their fingers and press a fingernail into it for sport. Yora's mouth worked once, then closed. He had nothing to give on that point. He had never been known for keeping children safe. The woman I serve, he said after a breath, knows what a bargain is. She will not ask you to follow her banners. She will not ask you to kneel. She will ask you to make common cause where cause is common. The South has spilled your blood on a mourning square. The men who feed on that throne will not allow you to sit up here and knit your own winter without paying a tithe of sons. If you want to be left alone, you must fight them anyway. Better to fight with fire than with more snow. Ned did not answer. He walked to the window and looked on at the river. A gull tried to steal a fish from a smaller bird and lost it to the water. A boy on the quay threw a stick at both of them and shouted as if he had won some portion of the day's victory. Across the city, a ribbon of shadow moved against the rooftops, and he could not say whether he truly saw it or whether his mind had grown hospitable to new shapes. He put his hand on the cold stone. "My daughter," he said, in a voice that did not belong to a lord, "if the queen you serve can give me Sansa back, and word of Arya living, I will do much that I would not do otherwise. If her beasts cannot take a castle without burning the men who hold it as if they were wheat, I will not be the man who brings that on any father's son." He turned then and looked at Yora. "And you," he said, "will not set foot on Bear Island without Meej taking a piece of you to hang over her hearth. And you will not stand before the heart tree with me, for I will not have you set your shadow there. But you have given me a thing to think about. There is truth in it whether I like it or no. If you are honest, you will not seek honor as your wages for bringing it. It is not for you. My honor is a torn cloak," Yora said plain. "I am not a man to wear it again in this country. I came for the North and for her, and because I was tired of being a man who had made only foolish bargains. I will return to my queen and tell her that the wolf is neither fool nor child, and that he is a father." When they were gone, Theon laughed and tossed a coin in his hand and caught it again, as if he could catch and throw away the whole thing as easily. "Dragons on our sea," he said. "I'd pay a long silver to see my father's face when he hears that. He likes to think ships answer only to him and the storms that kiss him." "Do not speak to me of your father today," Ned said. "There is more salt in this room already than any man needs." They set quarters for the Braavosi and their pale lord and the shadow that was Yora. White Harbor's men watched them with eyes like shutters in a storm. Slammed open, slammed shut, peering through the crack. 2 days later, the city knew a different kind of silence than fish barrels could explain. The shadow passed again at noon, when bread loaves were set on tables and men had their mouths full and therefore could not speak. It came from the east like a thought that has been following a man all morning and at last taps his shoulder. The river's skin wrinkled. The dragon dropped one wing and sheered toward the quay as a hawk might. It was no mountain. It was a lean thing with movements of such sense that men's eyes trusted it even while their bodies tried to flee. Its scales were indeed the color of old bronze, but where the sunlight fell hard at its shoulder, it flashed like coins and made a pattern that no man's hand could have hammered. Its eyes were yellow and not loving. When it breathed, what came was not some coarse flame like a drunkard's trick, but a tidy, focused wind of heat, the edge of a larger fire held back by discipline. It sent that breath over the flat top of a cart piled with wet netting simply to dry it, and the wet ropes smoked and steam lifted and left the netting ready for tomorrow. It did not look at the men, but somehow it knew where their eyes were. You felt seen and ignored at once. Then it beat once more and rose as if the air were fewer and fewer steps farther apart, and was gone. The city took one breath, then another. A girl in a blue apron laughed and clapped and then put her hand over her mouth as if her elder's fear had caught up to her laughter. Wyman Manderley came to the balcony and stood with Ned and said, thoughtfully, "I have never seen a beast so certain of its own bone. A whale knows how large it is but cannot climb a stair. That thing could scratch its own back on a cloud and try again if the cloud did not please it. And yet it dried a net. They want us to look at them and see more than war," Ned said. "They want us to see usefulness and discipline." "They have the right of it," Wyman said, honest. If I had 100 of those, I would straighten a dozen lords' manners without ever unsheathing a sword. Luckily for a dozen lords, Ned said. You do not. He thought of Sansa in a high room with a needle and a curtsy and a creature with golden hair and a smile like a knife. He thought of Arya somewhere with her face dirty and a stick in her hand solving the world one fight at a time. He thought of Jon on a wall of blue ice with a sword and a purpose. He thought of Bran and Rickon and the dogs. He thought of the heart tree's mouth carved down and the mouth of the man in the square who had smiled on the day he had almost died. He thought, a father. That night, with the lanterns arranged as if one could make a map of a hall from light alone. Ned sat among the North's lords who had come to White Harbor quickly at his call and slowly at the Weathers. The great Jon was there, big and gleeful and contemptuous of any story that did not end in a fight. Lady Meege sat with her daughter Lyra and her jaw jutting like a ship's prow. Roose Bolton sat quiet and watchful, with a face like an empty plate, and his men drank as if the ale wanted to escape their cups and needed the help. Rickard Karstark counted the rings on his own hand and made sums nobody else had asked him to make. Wyman beamed. Theon leaned back with his boots toward the fire and his pretty knife on the table where men could see it. There were lesser men also, clever foresters and stubborn stonecutters and masters of nets who were lords in everything but name when they were at home. Ned let the air in the room fill up with their breath before he began. He told them the truth, which was more difficult than the rest, that he had lived by the weakness of men, not his own strength, that the Lannisters would always pretend to strength and see in the North only land to feed a throne. That ship had come and a queen had sent a thing above them that dried wet nets and could set fire to a king's pride as easily. He said the word Sansa as if it were a sword he meant to use and the name Arya as if saying it might put blood back in it. He did not say Daenerys's name often. He said, "The East knows itself. We may choose how much it shall know us." A little girl with 3 lizards. The great Jon scoffed, but there was hunger in his scoff. My men would string their tails and wear them to battle. Go up to the roof with your shirt off next time she sends one over, Wyman suggested sweetly, and see whether your nipples survive. If they do, you may wear them too. Dragons are meat, Great Jon said, rocking back in his chair. Men kill anything if they are given time and the right hook. Men who talk as if everything were meat end up feeding others, Lady Meege said without looking at him. Ser Jorah Mormont set his feet through this hall today at the end of a leash. I would like his head to put on a shelf. But the dragon that flew did not. If a head is to be taken tonight, start there, Umber. I could do with another shelf. The great Jon snorted, considered the potential happiness of smashing the table in half and then thought better of it. Bolton's eyes ticked from one face to another as if he were a man reading a page that could change while he looked. Karstark said nothing.
Ned waited.
A lord can lose a room by wanting it too quickly. I will not kneel to a Targaryen, Rickard said at last, the words slow and heavy as if he had to wrestle them into a straight line. My sons died in Southron wars. I will not put what I have left under a banner that made widows of my father's sisters. We need not kneel, Ned said. She does not ask us to kneel. She asks to fight the South with us. She asks to do her own war in our sky while we do ours on the ground. She asks for harbor and bread and the long gray of a northern pact. She cannot take a city like King's Landing alone and keep it, and we cannot force them to return Sansa with bread and peat and wolves' mouths. You think she would give the girl back? Bolton asked, calm, almost bored. His tone made any answer sound foolish before it existed. I think she knows bargaining better than most kings, Ned said. I think if she can give me that, I will give the North a winter with less blood in it than the South would have us spend. And I think if she cannot, then we can send her back across the sea with a belly full of our bread and no promise made, and we will still have learned the measure of a dragon's wing. Lady Meege thumped the table with her knuckles. I will not sit in a hall and speak of dragons as if they were a dress, she said, half fierce, half weary. Either we have the good sense to look at the world and see how it is changing, or we sit here and call the wind names for the pleasure of hearing our own voices. I cannot give you back your daughter, Stark. I cannot give myself back my honor. But if there is a chance to take a bite out of the South big enough to keep them from putting more of their sons on our chairs, I will hold their queen's horse while she takes her piss in my yard and call it courtesy." "You always were the soul of courtesy, Meej," Wyman murmured, and reached for another stuffed capon as if to show the world there were still certain wealths left to a man. "Have it your way, Stark," the great Jon said at last, slapping his hand against the wood so hard the plates jumped. "Put your hand in the dragon's mouth and see whether it bites or licks. When you draw it back, I'll either clasp it or cut it off." This was as good as a blessing. Ned nodded once, and the room exhaled. Roose Bolton's mouth made the smallest possible movement that might have been read as a smile by a man desperate to find one. The dogs in the courtyard barked at a shadow that may have been a cloud. The night put its cold fingers through the shutters as if to remind them they were small things, all of them, and would be smaller yet when the snow laid its hand on them. They gave the dragon's men their answer in the morning. They would permit an embassy to Winterfell with all the courtesies and caution that word entailed. And if the Eastern Queen wished to speak of girls' safety and men's ships and where the South ended and the North began, she might set her feet on Northern stone and the dogs would not be set on her. She would not bring down fire upon any roof while they broke bread. She would leave one of her young beasts on a ship in the harbor as a sign she was not a thief. Ned wrote these things in Luwin's clean hand and sealed them with the running wolf. Jorah bowed as if he were in a Braavosi play and had studied how to show humility to men he despised. The frost-haired Braavosi bowed because he understood that bows are part of a language that makes cities safer to live in. They went away to their ship that had the wrong sails for this sea and the right caution for this city. On the second morning after he returned to Winterfell, the sun came like a coin the gods had turned over and were examining. Ned found Catelyn at the edge of the moat with the frost on the reeds made into jewels and Bran telling Hodder a story backwards to see if the ending came out different. Rickon was trying to throw snowballs at the fish and hitting the stone instead. The air smelt of iron and the unsent letters men keep behind their teeth. "It is not going to be simple," he said to Catelyn quietly, as if speaking to her aloud would unsettle the ducks. "Nothing honest ever is. I will try to count the heads that need counting and keep our hearths warm and our hands clean. But there are coins to be thrown into new pools now. We will need the courage to watch them fall without pretending to know where they will land." "You need not pretend anything for me," she said. "You need not let me see whatever face the men in the hall have need of. I did not mar. A mask." "I know," he said. He let himself look at her as he had not allowed himself to do for many days, watched the way cold made life in her mouth, thought of the way grief had once made a nest under her clavicle and how she had lifted it out every morning and set it down every night like a wooden bowl you will use forever because it was your mother's. "I am sorry to take more of you into danger. Do not be sorry to share the world," she said. "We were not made to bear it alone." That night, Ned walked to the Godswood again. He was not a man for ceremonies. He had always taken the gods as he found them. Old wood, running water, a wind through leaves. He had always believed that if the gods wanted more than that, they would have made a people who could spare them the time. The heart tree did not greet him. It remembered him in the way that stones remember men, by wearing them down a little bit at a time. He stood beneath the red leaves and breathed. "For the north," he said, and the steam of his breath joined the spring's ghosts for a moment and then was gone. "For my daughter, for my son on the wall, for my boys, for my wife, for any man who has to bury his pride to keep another man's child from the snow." The face carved into the white bark did not answer, but the pool moved very slightly, as if a big fish had flexed deep beneath the reflected sky. When he came out of the trees to cross the yard, he looked up without knowing why he meant to. The night had been hard and clear and starry as hammered steel when he had entered the wood. Now there was something else, a motion that did not belong to wind. He stopped. The guards on the wall stopped. A dog, mid-growl, turned the sound into a sigh as if it had forgotten what it was angry about. The dragon, when it came at last to Winterfell, did not announce itself as a storm. It came like a thought a man was ashamed to have and could not banish. It came from the north, which made no sense, and it made sense all the same, because where else would anything choose to come from if it wanted Ned Stark to accept it or send it away? It was lower than at White Harbor, so close that he could hear a steady leathery sound like a sail in a night breeze. Men's mouths opened without their leave. The creature's skin was darker for the lack of the sun, brown-black like a good loaf, with the same warm, hidden heat. Its eyes were still yellow and not friendly. It did not land. It circled twice and let down a long limb to touch the tip of a wing on one of the tower stones as if to say, "I know your height." Then it rose again, and Ned could have sworn, in that mad moment when the world makes metaphors without asking, he saw it nod. When it had gone and the air remembered how to be northern again, when the dogs remembered they were not wolves, men breathed. Ned turned to the men on the walls, to Harwin, to Theon with his head thrown back and his mouth open in wonder, to the old grooms who had seen men burn but not beasts fly. "The South will hear of this before morning," Theon said, awed and hungry both. "The river has more tongues than the court ever had." "Let them hear," Ned said. His own voice surprised him with its plainness. "We will not be the first to speak of it. We will be the first to say what we mean to do." He slept so little that night that morning found him still clothed. He rose and fastened a heavy cloak with a clasp in the shape of a running wolf. He put a hand on the scar beneath his jaw and thought of how close a man can come to ending and still have to rise and choose between bread and ash. He went to the solar and found Luwin already at his work, the little chain of his order bright as fish on a dock. The old man looked up and asked no foolish questions. "Send a raven south," Ned said, "to the rock and to the keep by the Blackwater, and to any man who would care to count the days of his own son. Tell them that a northern lord has received a queen's embassy and has not killed it. Tell them that a dragon has smelled snow and did not die of it. Tell them nothing else. Even that will be too much for some," Luwin said, writing with his careful, spare hand. "The world moves at its own gait, my lord. We put reins on it and call ourselves riders. The gods smile." "Let them," Ned said. "We will see who laughs last, whether it be gods or men." He thought of Sansa with a curtsy that would be a memory by now, if she had sense enough to let memory help her. He thought of Arya with a face perhaps already learning to be other faces. He thought of Jon, whose oath pulled him like a candle's thin spine. He thought of dragons on the roof of the world and men in the crypts below Winterfell who had held swords of stone in their always hands for longer than dragons existed in this age. The day would come when decisions would arrive like horsemen and demand answers with steel. For now, there were letters and the smell of oats, and the dog's breath like a comfort by the door. He took up his own quill then, set aside the sigils, and wrote one letter in a hand that did not often present itself to the world. "Sansa," he wrote, and then the words that could fit between such a father and his absence. He wrote about porridge and the steam from the springs and how her brothers had quarreled over a spoon. He wrote about the kitchen's apple tarts. He wrote about nothing that mattered and everything that did. He folded it and sealed it and knew it might never pass the gate of the palace where it needed to go. He wrote another to Arya and did the same, but in this one he did not pretend he thought she would be sat where his words could find her. He said, "Wherever you set your feet, set them as if they were your own." He put his head in his hands then very briefly and breathed like a man keeping a small flame alive. When he raised it again, the light from the window had moved an inch over the table. Time was working. Men were working within it for ill and for good. The dragon beyond the wall of the world moved unseen in whatever weather dragons preferred. Later that day, a rider came up from the south gate, spattered with a different sort of mud. He had the air of a man who had taught himself the art of not being observed. He asked for no ale, only a place to sit and a bandage for his horse's knee. He carried no seal, only a wad of cloth in which there lay 3 bright strands of hair like sunlight captured and braided into silk. He said no queen's name. He said quietly and neatly, in a voice that made Ned's heart listen before his head could do it. "A girl with hair like summer and hands like leaves sent this. She was kind to a starving dog. The men she was with were not. After the man had eaten and unlike other men had not grown warmer in the effort. After the horse had its knee bound and nodded as if it accepted the precaution. After the yard had swallowed the newcomer as it swallowed most things, Ned stood alone again. though there is no such thing as alone in a great house, only less crowded, and stared at the bright strands on his table. He thought of how much a single hair can be to a father who has none of the rest. "We will make our alliance," he said aloud to the empty air, because empty air is as good a witness as a man with a parchment sometimes. "We will make it as narrowly and as honest as a good sword. We will not give away our ground for a dream. We will not burn a peasant's thatch for a prince's bed. But we will not wait in the snow and hope the south forgets us while it eats itself." The air did not answer. It rarely did. But in the yard a boy laughed, and above the keep a crow called out once, and then thought better of whatever it had been about to say. The wind shifted and brought with it a spice Ned had once only known in tales. Someone in the kitchen had found a bolt of cinnamon and was brave enough to use it. He smiled. There would be dragons in their winter, but there would also be porridge. He went down into the crypts that evening alone, a lantern in his hand and the smell of damp stone making the passages feel closer than they were. The Stone Kings lay in their rows, hands on their stone swords, wolves at their feet. They had watched more winters and more summers than a man could count. They did not care about dragons. They did not care about letters. They had cared about the North and the bones in it when they were living. Now they cared about none of it and all of it at once by simply being stone. He passed by his father and did not stop. He passed by his brother, whose laughter he had heard last on a day when everything had burned. He came to Lyanna and stood a long time. He did not speak. He did not need to. When at last he turned to go, there was a stir of air in the passage that had no business being there. A small thing, the sort of change that makes the hair on a man's arms feel taller. He lifted the lantern a little. The passage stood as it had, straight and narrow and honest as a wound. He went up. He came into the castle's living air. Somewhere a woman sang to a child in a kitchen the old song about the moon and the geese. Somewhere a man cursed a horse that would not obey him. Somewhere Caitlin walked the gallery and counted the men in it without letting herself seem as if she were counting. He went back to the God's Wood once more before the night finished with the castle. The pool at the heart tree held more stars than the sky above it, as if the water were greedier and more efficient at giving back what it took. He could smell ash again, the faint, impossible hint of it, and he did not know whether it was memory or anticipation, or the way the wind took itself around a corner it had not expected. The red leaves trembled the slightest bit. He stood. He breathed. He allowed himself, for the space of 10 breaths, to imagine a world in which this hard, inventive new partnership did not end in ash. At dawn, before the yard woke to its work, a shadow came from the east and made the western wall blush. It circled once and then set a neat line of heat along the winter-dead ivy on the outer tower, crisping it as a cook might crisp a goose skin. The ivy crackled and then the smell came up, good and clean and bright as a hope. Then the beast was gone and the yard shouted itself awake. By noon a raven had come from the south, fat with a secret it could not help croaking about. "An envoy you will not turn away," it said in the clipped hand of a man who had never dipped a quill in anything but ink. "A lion is not a stag, nor a child." He had the gall to sign it with a hand that belonged to a boy king. Ned let it lie open on the table. It smelled like wax and water and the fear of men who feared the wrong things. He folded it and slid it into the box with the bright hair. He would answer later. He would answer with fire and stone and the sort of words that take time to sharpen. And the day went on, as days must, with crackling and porridge, with hammers and quills, with men who do not believe in dragons being kind to dogs they did not want and boys who did believing in themselves a little too much. Winterfell took up the rhythm it had always kept. The rhythm beneath the rumors of ships and lords and letters. There was a reason the God's Wood kept a different time. It was because it remembered. It remembered that men could step from one winter to another and be the same and be changed and still have to choose between bread and ash every morning for as long as they were permitted. The heart tree's face did not smile. Neither did it weep. By evening, men on the walls were used to glancing up now, where once their eyes had learned only to teach the ground its place. A boy with a wooden sword strutted and swung at shadows, and every time he struck, He made a sound like a man who had not yet learned that winning and losing both begin in a kitchen with a bowl of porridge and a spoon that two brothers will fight over. The W. Wolves in the kennels yawned and settled with their chins on their paws, as if winter were the only story that mattered. In the great hall, candles burned with a care that suggests expense. Caitlin lifted her cup and met her husband's eyes across the table in a moment nobody recorded, and yet everything meaningful was written down. And beyond the walls, over the old forest and the river that the city had named and renamed until it had no time left for other noble deeds, something large and confident and sure of its bones carved a path through the air where no man's banner had power. It was not war, not yet. It was a beginning, and beginnings are slower than endings, and demand more of a man than he is willing to spend in a day. Ned knew that. The dragon knew that. Somewhere beyond a sea, a young woman sat at a table with a map and a bowl of olives and a cup of watered wine and a sense that something she had done had not ended, but started to be, and felt the tiredness that comes of doing things the right way instead of the quickest. In the north, the wind turned and smelled briefly, inexplicably, like summer. Then it changed its mind and remembered what it had come for, and men drew their cloaks up and women banked the fires. The day tried one last time to stretch itself into a story and failed in the way days do when they are meant to be only the first chapter. She had taken to sleeping with maps because they argued less than men. In the Bravosi house that by day smelled of lemon oil and wet wood and by night took on the tide's breath and the memory of many dinners, the young woman sat with a oiled parchment that crackled when the table shifted. The table shifted because the city did, the house timbers moving the way men do when age sets in, careful, unwilling to pick a fight with the joints that hurt. She pushed aside the olives and the cup that had made water taste important and watched a drop of lamp oil run down the bronze shaft of a candlestick as if it were a serpent that had grown tired of itself. Yora came in without music. He never came with it. His step announced itself only to those who had learned it. She was one of those now. He stopped and bowed with the ghost of the man he once had been, then set his scarred hand on the back of the chair opposite and looked not at the olives or the maps but at her face, as if seeking some sign that the news he carried would fit there. "You were right about the wolf," he said. "You were wrong about everything being easy." "I never said easy," she answered. "I said necessary." "Then you were right," he allowed. "He did not throw us in the sea. He did not spit. He watched a dragon dry a net and did not run to fetch spears. He asked for his daughter like a man asking for his heart. He is older than his hair." "Older than his hair," she repeated, and let the words weigh themselves. He would not promise to burn men in their beds or to kneel and dine on ashes for breakfast. No, Yora's mouth tilted at the edge toward a smile he did not like to wear in front of her. He said, "If you can give me back what is mine, I will do what I would not do for fire alone. If you cannot, we will still find a way to call this a visit. He is honest the way old iron is honest. It will not shine as a mirror, but it will not bend for pleasure either." "Honesty," she murmured. "My brother said the North was nothing but ice and stories, but he took what he wanted and called it truth." "Your brother never kept a hearth," he said. "He never learned what fire is for before he tried to wear it." He reached for an olive and then remembered himself and let his hand settle on the table instead. "My queen," he said, and there was the smallest of humors in the word. He had taught himself to use it like a tool here, not a prayer. "He will receive an embassy at Winterfell. He requires words he can write on slates and promises he can count in a storehouse." She nodded, small and precise. There were two other men in the room. Neither had spoken. One was the frost-haired Bravosi who had learned to make his vowels unthreatening and his bows short enough not to draw mockery. The other stood with his back to the window's shutters, a shadow with a straight back, the kind of man who knew how to bind a small cut and a large insult and keep both from festering. "Missandei," she called softly, and from the adjacent room where the blue-painted walls were cool as a fountain, a girl came in with a book under her arm and a reed pen tucked behind her ear. She was slight in the way sharp weapons are, and her eyes were steady with the steadiness of someone who writes what matters and has no time for the rest. "You will go with Rigo," the young queen said. "You will not be his mother. You will not be his keeper. You will be our voice when the words need feet, and you will count promises while the men count swords." Missandei inclined her head as if it were a measure she was adding. "Do you wish that I speak of chains?" she asked. Braavos had stretched her vowels into something more soft than Noth had given her. She made the word chains sound like a water plant. "Speak of their absence," the young woman said. "Speak of food. Speak of heat. Speak of horses and ports and the number of ships that can slip through ice if they have a reason to run. Speak of girls. If this wolf is a father first, then speak of daughters as if we had been made for nothing else. And do not promise anything we do not know how to do without burning a field to the black roots. The men of White Harbor would light their own fields if it warmed their hands," the Braavosi observed. "The fat lord smiles as if butter were a politics. They are people," she said, "so of course they would. But some fires teach and some only eat. We will be teachers where we can." She lifted a small carved token from the map and moved it as a child moves a toy man on a board, then realized with a rueful little brie, that she had never been allowed such toys. "And Yora," she added, and it was still strange, sometimes, to hear herself give men tasks and have them accept them. "You will tell me again what his hall smelled like. Men say much with their mouths, but a room tells on them." "Stone, hot springs, porridge," Yora said without shame. "The heart tree outside is old and tastes like winter even when the air is warm. There is a girl in the kitchen who is afraid of dying but not of knives. There is salt in the Lord's air even when he sleeps." "Good," she said. She pushed the olives aside and took up her pen. She had learned to write words that would change nations, and to keep her own hand from shaking when she wrote them. The pen scratched fireless in the quiet. When she finished and read it back, and she was always careful to read it back, she had Missandei copy it, not because Missandei made fewer mistakes than her, but because two hands made a stronger promise than one. The seal she pressed into the wax was new, and therefore suspect. The dragons' heads had not yet learned how their shadows fell on men's faces. She set it aside. "Rakaro will go with you," she said to Missandei. The shadow in the window moved the smallest bit. "He does not like roofs that are not tents. He does not like stones that do not talk. But he will not sleep while you sleep." "I sleep like a cat," Missandei said, and for a heartbeat there was a glint in her that had nothing to do with survival. "I can pretend to sleep while listening to what I must." "I know," the queen said, not smiling. "We must all be good at pretending. The rest of the city will say, 'The dragons have learned manners. Let them. It is better to shock men with kindness than to comfort them with fear. They will not know which knife to watch.'" When the others were gone, she sat alone with the map whose oiled skin reflected the candlelight and made the rivers seem alive. Her hand went to the place that would be Winterfell, though she had never stood on that stone, and she breathed until she had convinced her ribs that breath was not treason. "Older than his hair," she murmured again, because the words pleased her and because they suggested a man, not a fable. "Send me your father," she told the map, "and I will send you back your daughter." In King's Landing, the wind off the Blackwater was carrying the stale anger of fish and the sweet lies of wine houses into the square below the Red Keep. Sansa stood at a window where she could see only the upper slope of the hill and the slate of roofs like dishes overturned after a feast. A man below had caught a stray dog that had wandered too near a stall of meat, and was striking it with a narrow stick as if to hammer it back into some mold he preferred. The dog took the beating as a stone takes the rain, crouched around its belly with the stupid patience of pain. She put her hand on the sill and then took it back. Her fingers were chilled and the stone did not want her heat. "Do not watch," a voice said behind her, quiet and practical. "You will only carry it with you when you go to sleep." The woman who spoke was no one in particular and therefore was allowed into rooms where lords were too busy to watch which keys passed to which hands. She had the arms of someone who scrubbed and the eyes of someone who was never surprised by men. She had, days ago, unpicked 3 strands of Sansa's hair from a brush and wrapped them in a cloth and watched as a boy no one had owned slipped them into his clothes. She had not asked permission. Sansa had not noticed. She had only noticed after, when the brush was lighter in her hand, and then had gone to the gods she had left in the north and asked them to forgive her for being relieved. "I will carry it whether I watch it or not," Sansa said. She heard the woman move, not toward her, but toward the hearth where the fire was too small to pretend at warmth and flourished anyway because it had been told to. The woman stirred it the way an experienced wife stirs a man's bad mood, without impatience, without flattery. "You have news?" Sansa asked, because the woman did not come to her rooms without bringing something besides a swept floor. The woman made a small sound that was not quite a yes and not quite its cousin. "A little man rides north," she said, with that curious respect some pragmatic people feel for skill no matter what shape it wears. "The one who likes to talk as if the words were wine and he owned the vineyard. He has a scar now where he did not before. He will speak more carefully than men expect him to and less carefully than you would like." "Tyrion," Sansa said. The name felt like a pebble in her mouth. "He was kind to my brother once." "Kindness is the coin he likes," the woman said, and held out the poker and watched the smallest tongue of flame turn the iron's tip orange. "He spends it when it buys him something. That is how most coin is used." "Will he go to Winterfell?" Sansa asked, hearing her own need and not despising it, because she had come to learn that contempt only makes need worse. "Will he see my father?" The words hit the air and then fell because the air here was not generous. "Perhaps," the woman said. "Or he will sleep in the guest hall nearest the kitchen because he is not a man to refuse a meal and not a man to make suicides of servants. If your father has sense, he will listen to him and then do something he was already going to do. That is how men stay safe." "Safe," Sansa whispered. The dog below had stopped making noise. The man had grown bored, or had been distracted by a better insult to someone who could return it. "Am I foolish to think of the gods would?" she asked without turning. "I think of it as if thinking could bring it closer. The smell of the water there, the red leaves. I think of it when I am not happy, not exactly, but not caught. If I think of it too much, will it turn on me and make me weak? The trees, why? I'll not betray you if the people do," the woman said. She set the poker against the hearth and wiped her hands on her apron with a gesture so neat it was almost dainty. "They will grow whether you live or not. It is not kindness, but it is not malice. It is a sort of fairness, better than most men manage." The door opened without a knock, and a man with a helm tucked under his arm came in like a knight that has misremembered its manners. The hound's mouth was a ruin, and his eyes were the least pitying thing Sansa had ever met. Because they were so honest, she had learned to prefer them to any southern smile. He set the helm on the table as if putting down a threatening guest and looked her over in a way that once would have made her shrink. Now she stood, and if her hands clenched, she did so where he could not see. "You like dogs," he said, as if calling rain what it was. "You should not watch that if you like them." "I was thinking of home," she said, and did not ask him for news because the hound did not bring it unless news obeyed him, and most news did not. He grunted, and the corner of his ruined mouth moved a fraction of an inch toward humor. "Home," he said. "It's a story men tell bedrooms to keep them from being hungry. The dwarf rides. If anyone can talk sense to a man who kissed a weirwood once and remembers it, it's him." He picked up the poker and set it at a better angle, then set it down again as if irritated to find himself near a domestic tool. "You want a thing," he said to her bluntly. "Want it like men want their heads to be ruby-studded. I can smell it. It's not bad wanting, just makes you easy to aim at." "What do you want?" she asked him, bold in the way that comes of being tired. "Not to be burned," he said, and put his helmet under his arm again, and went out as if the room offended him by being small. North of the wall, the air had made its decision to be winter and was carrying out its duty to the letter. Snow did not fall so much as drift like thought. It collected in the fur between Ghost's ears and made the direwolf look older than he was. Jon brushed it off with one gloved hand, and Ghost shook and sent it up like a small private storm. Sam trudged and caught his boot in a hidden branch and stumbled and apologized to the tree, and the tree did not answer. "Stop apologizing to bark," the ranger ahead of him said through the cloth that had been wound over his lower face until only a stripe of eyes showed. Save it for the men you'll have to kill when they mistake you for meat." "I am not meat," Sam said stoutly, and then his breath caught. He sounded affronted by the concept, but also nervous about contradicting experience. "I mean, of course I am. I know we all are, but you'd prefer to keep the skin that keeps other people's teeth off your bones," John offered, not unkind. "So would I." Left here. He let Ghost take the trail because Ghost was wiser than any map the Watch owned. They had been learning that truth one small embarrassment at a time. The trees shifted around them and the light did tricks, sliding into spaces where it did not belong and then abandoning noble endeavors without warning. Mormont had sent them to find a thing that had been told to him by a man who had seen a thing told to him by a woman whose cousin had dreamt of heat in the woods. That was how the Watch worked sometimes. There were maps, and then there were the other maps that the living make, and the two made a country between them. Ghost stopped as if he had found the edge of something important. John smelled it then, a faint wrongness, like water trying to remember how to be fire. The ground opened into a small clearing where the snow had not settled because something had kept the air moving lately. In the center, a circle of birch trunks stood blistered and blackened to the height of a man's waist. The scorch had not killed them. It took more than a single thought to end a tree. But the holes in their white skin looked like old injuries. In the middle of the circle was a neat ring of stones, delicate as a necklace and not the way wild folk make a fire, not careless, not hidden. John crouched and held his hand over the ashes and felt a heat so subtle, he might have imagined it if Ghost hadn't made a tiny sound that meant, "I smell dawn." "Not men," Dywin said, kneeling with that odd grace old big men develop when they forget they are old and big. "Not our men. Not theirs. It's too tidy for a camp and not tidy enough for mummery. God save us from neatness north of here. It always means someone has had the time to think." Sam looked at the black-banded birch and made a noise that might have been admiration if it had not had fear under it. "This is wrong," he said softly, "but wrong like stealing too much and never being caught. Not like—" He did not say dead men. He had learned not to say that in the woods. "Dragons?" Dywin said, and spat, not in disgust but as if to relieve his mouth of something exotic. "If the stories are true, they can make a circle like this by breathing and laughing at the same time. Why would a dragon come north of the wall?" Another of the men demanded, resentful of novelty. "What would it eat that it couldn't find warm?" John lifted a scrap from the ashes with 2 fingers. It was not wood. It looked like the delicate cuticle of a monster. It held a little light and sent it away again in patterns he could not quite follow. If he set it against his skin, it warmed him as if remembering heat. He thought of the shadow over Winterfell, the slow discipline, the way the beast had refused the temptation to become a story about terror when a story about kindness would be more useful. He did not smile. "If I were a beast that loved heat and had learned a taste for the strange," he said, "I would want to know what the world looks like when it is nothing but the coldest truth. A man goes to a ruin to remember how big the world is. A dragon would go to the E&D of it to learn the same." "Pretty," Dywin said, not unkindly. "Don't talk that way in the hall. The meat will go out of the stew and we will all freeze. Take your strange shell and put it in a pocket. We'll tell the old bear that the world is as confusing as he suspected." On the 3rd day after the dragon's wing had brushed Winterfell's stone, a small ship with a shallow belly eased itself up the White Knife and was greeted by men with eyes that memorized. It flew no banners and had been scrubbed until even the tar in its seams seemed pious. On its deck stood a young woman whose skin told a story of a sun that had not lately been seen, and a man with his hair braided in a fashion that made him look untrustworthy and noble at the same time. They did not wave. They were not sure whether this was a waving city. White Harbor watched them the way a cat watches a new kind of bird. Wyman fed them before he spoke to them, and thus kept to everything he had ever believed he could control. He served them potted fish that tasted of winter and lemons, and small cakes with honey that made the young woman's eyes widen in a way that explained why men in the kitchen were willing to try new things. In the first lull, when the Bravosi who had Dothraki swagger in his bones had set aside his careful fork and Missandei had folded her hands like a book closed in the right place, Wyman said, "I am an old man who likes manners. You seem to own several. I write them down before I try them, the girl from Noth said, her common a careful necklace built out of time. If I cannot say them after, I do not keep them. Good, Wyman said. Write this down if you please. A dragon dried my men's nets, and I am not too proud to be grateful. Write this down too. If a dragon burns my storehouses, I will turn against your mistress without needing anyone to instruct me on the proper place to put a knife. Missandei's pen made a sound like a mouse under a chair. Swift, then gone. I will write down gratitude before knives, she said. It draws a better line. They did not sleep in White Harbor more than a night. Wyman would gladly have kept them for a week to feed them every recipe he had not yet tried on men of his own house. But Winterfell was where winter's consent lay, and their time was not theirs. So the shallow ship went on again through water that wore a skin of light in the morning and none at all at night. Fishermen stared as they passed and named the strangers for their own children over their shoulders to keep luck from leaving the boats. The ship made for the port where Winterfell was not, and then horses took the journey up through fields where the soil was readying itself to clench, then loosen, then clench again and forgive no one who did not plan. Before the gatehouse, the party slowed because men who love the things they guard always slow at thresholds. Harwin came down the yard with his easy seat and his hair bound back as if it were an animal that would be a nuisance if let loose. The guest hall was made ready the way a man makes ready his hands before he meets a new friend. Men had scrubbed and women had insisted on certain niceties being done the right way even if they were not the northern way. Ned met them without crown and with hands he did not hide. He looked at the girl and then at the man who stood to her left the way a man might stand behind a king, near enough to be useful, far enough to absolve. The girl made a small bow that was not the Riverlands and not the Souths and not Essos either. It was Notha's or a new country she was inventing. Ricardo looked past Ned at the banners hung in the hall and at the space where the banners were not, old kings who did not need colored cloth to be huge. He nodded once, as if to a horse he had not yet ridden. Welcome to my roof, Ned said. Set your feet on it as if you meant to stand and not to run. We prefer standing, Missandei said, pleased. Running makes ink misbehave. They sat at table and ate winter food, and if the Eastern pair found the dishes dense, they were too polite to say it. Catelyn watched the girl from her place with the calm interest of a mother who has had enough daughters to know what is learned and what is born. Bran marked the braids in the man's hair and resolved to ask about the meaning. Rickon stared until the man stared back with the patient amusement of someone who had known too many children to be surprised by a fierce small boy with a spoon in his hand like a weapon. Theon measured, as Theon always measured, how much insult could a man bear and still make a joke of his day, and found that the Braavosi had no interest in that game. When they were alone with Luwin and the stones and a jug of beer that accepted no silly pretensions, Missandei placed a small object on the table, no larger than a plum, dull as iron, but warmer under the hand than a stone had any right to be. A heart coal, she said, from under the place where our dragons sleep. They do not cool unless you submerge them in water. If set in a forge, they take less wood and smile upon the iron you put to them. If set by a woman who has a child, they keep the air beside the cradle from freezing. We are told that is the right thing to say in the north. We are told truth is preferred with you. These are good words, Luwin said, blunt and pleased and counting silently the brazier pans that could be moved to better uses. This is the right thing to say to a man who has watched too many knives and too few newborn girls live to have their second naming day. My queen asks for harbor, Missandei said. Not for herself. Not yet. She is learning to be patient with crossing water. For men who speak for her. For beasts that learn discipline when they sleep near human hearts. She asks for the promise that men will not shoot at us from your rooftops because they are frightened. She offers heat and the sight of a thing men thought forgotten. She offers heat. Our eyes flicked in a way that said she had learned even here to measure the weight of hope. She offers to ask for your daughter without shame and without asking you to kneel when you ask for her. Ned set his hand on the heart coal and realized the truth in the name. It did not burn. Promised. He let his fingers rest there because a man must sometimes let his body know first what his mind will accept later. "The Lannister envoy rides," he said. "He will arrive in days. He will ask for my head with flowers. He will offer sugar to my dogs. He will say that dragons are children's books. You will not be here by then, perhaps, and that is probably wise. But if you are, you will find that my roof does not burn when men argue. You will find that my men do not draw swords in the hall unless I have lost my mind." Missandei tilted her head in a way that acknowledged discipline when she saw it. "I prefer roofs that do not burn," she said. "I prefer children's books that grow teeth only when asked to by their mothers." "Your queen is not her father," Ned said. "I know this. I am not mine either. But blood tells a hard story in our land, and I must teach my people how not to fear the wrong things." He looked at Ricardo. "Do you have a horse you like as much as your knives?" he asked, surprising himself with the question and pleased to be surprised. "Yes," Ricardo said, in a common that was handsomely ugly and therefore lovely to Catelyn's ear. "He does not like snow. I told him you would be wrong. He told me I would be cold. We are both right." "Harwin," Ned said when the small council ended with Luwin's satisfaction and the heart coal wrapped in cloth and carried away as if it were a child, "show our guests the stables. Let them see that horses here are not always sad." In the stables Bran met a world he could hold with his hands. He had always liked the sound of the animals chewing. Honest, single-minded, without politics. Ricardo touched a mare's neck with reverence because there are religions inside men that do not require temples. "She is round," he said, approval hidden in the word. "She will carry anything you put on her," Harwin said. "She will not complain until long after you have begun to make mistakes. That is not always a kindness. She will let you be foolish too long." "Round is good," Ricardo said. "Round does not forget how to be strong." On the second morning after the Eastern pair's arrival, it snowed with the clean seriousness of a visitor who had finally decided to unpack. Men had to use their hands to convince doors they were doors. The kitchen turned out loaves that steamed like breath. Dogs disappeared into drifts and reappeared as if performing tricks. From the south, banners along the road moved like a strip of color someone had dropped in a white room. The man at their head rode a small, well-made horse and wore a hat that made him look shorter than he was and more comfortable than he should have been. He had a face that had learned how to listen to insults without collecting them. Tyrion Lannister sat down in Winterfell's guest hall and drank without complaint something that called itself ale and did not aspire to be more. He had 2 men with him in guard colors and the sort of humor that lives in poor men who are kept near princes. They did not speak unless spoken to, and even then were careful. He had a letter in his sleeve and a scar on his face and a look that suggested he had been more places than his legs alone could have carried him. "You've improved your saddle," Bran told him at once, because boys do not wait to see if a visitor is in the mood for talk when they have been thinking of hinges since breakfast. "Your forgiveness," Tyrion said solemnly, turning his head so that the old kindness sat beside the new scar like men who had not been introduced. "I think of it every time I sit. It makes me less afraid of falling into places where I would be unwelcome." Bran's eyes went to the scar and then away and then back again. "What did you fall into to get that?" he asked, which was not the sort of question men older than him could ask with impunity. Tyrion looked at Ned. Ned did not rescue him because a father who wants a boy to be brave does not always protect him from the answer to his own question. "War," Tyrion said, and did not elaborate. "It will do that whether you fall into it or it falls into you. It is like a well with no rope." He turned and gave Catelyn a measured nod that contained an apology she would keep and measure another day. "My lady, I come with words that are not my own and sense that is. I hope to be permitted to use them in the right order. You will be fed before you are made to prove your use," she said coolly, and it was a courtesy and a warning. After bread and meat that had been sliced with respect and an onion pie that made Tyrion's brows rise because onion pies everywhere tried too hard but this one did not, Ned and Tyrion sat together with Luwin watching and Catelyn listening and Missandei very neatly not in the room. "You hold my daughter," Ned said. He allowed himself no question marks. "We hold 2 women your blood would call by name if it had the chance," Tyrion answered. One openly and one so badly they have misplaced her at least twice and will be ashamed later to read how they did it. I come with both insults and offerings. The insult is that my sister and the boys she has taught to rule will not release your girl. The offering is that there are ways to set a bird loose without opening the whole aviary. You are spry, Ned said. It was as much praise as he could give a lion in Winterfell. What is the price for a bird who should never have been caged? Understood silence, Tyrion said, surprised himself by how tired he was of being clever. You do not kneel to dragons. You allow my king to keep saying you are troublesome but not treasonous. You will take a marriage when it suits you, not now. In Exja, NGE, she will be allowed to write letters that will arrive and to sit in gardens where men forget to whisper. After a time, there will be a page and then a cupbearer and then news of a litter of pups somewhere and then... He did not finish. He did not pretend that promises in King's Landing lasted longer than flowers. Ned listened and continued to breathe. You cannot trade air for bread, he said. You offer me walls with windows. I need doors. I offer you a small man's hand in a big man's house, Tyrion said. He allowed himself wine now that the hard part had been set on the table like a complicated dish no one yet knew how to eat. I can pry a bar with it. I can make guards look elsewhere. I can distract a queen. I am no dragon and I am no king. But if you want your girl to keep her face whole and her mind her own while larger wheels grind, you will take what a dwarf can give you. If you want her out at once, you must ally with fire and live with what burns. The word dragon sat between them like a carved toy no child had the courage to reach for. Luwin coughed into his sleeve, a courtly sound that moved nothing and promised nothing. I do not like my choices, Ned said, but I like other men making them for me less. Hear me then, your king will receive a letter and your sister, and the other men who pretend to be something different from what they are. It will say that I am a father and a lord and not in that order. It will say that I will not trill songs into the eastern wind, and I will not kneel on southern stones. It will say that if my daughter is harmed, I will feed dogs on a diet no man will like. And it will say that if she is seen walking under trees with a book in her hands and no harm, I will remember that men can be persuaded to behave like men sometimes. You want to make us be good by reminding us that we might be, Tyrion said. That is dirty fighting. He lifted his cup as apology and acceptance. I will do what I can for the girl. I will vex kings with reason. I will vex queens with stories they think they already know. I will write to men who do not like me and will do this anyway because it allows them to feel both generous and superior. If the world were made of me, it would be very annoying, but less bloody. Unfortunately, it is not made of me. Thank the gods, Catelyn said under her breath as she poured him more wine as if he were a man and not the sum of the crimes of his house. He went out into the yard later with his cloak drawn tight against a cold that took offense at men pretending they were not cold. Bran found him there exactly where he had once found him, a small man before a large thing who did not need to be reverent to understand scale. You said you would ask a thing of me, Bran told him. You said it when I was smaller. You were not smaller, Tyrion said. The world was, and then it remembered itself. He looked up at the tower that had not changed. I will ask it now. If you are to ride again, do not let anyone teach you to do it as if you were less than you were. If you are to be a lord, do not pretend to care more or less than you do. And if a dragon lands in your yard again, do not be the first boy to run under it and the last to run away. In some things, it is good to be middling. Bran laughed, and it sounded like metal that had been worked properly before it cooled. Hotter, he called without turning, and Hotter said hotter in a tone that meant, I am here. They left Tyrion looking up at a sky that did not answer. In the Dreadfort, where stone remembered differently and men smiled like knives left under blankets, a servant set down a bowl of something white and surrendered to the quiet that lived around the flayed man. Roose Bolton looked up from a letter with no seal and every intention and set his hand so that his fingers fanned on the table, pale as if they had never been blooded. Dragons, he said, and it was not quite a question and not quite anything else. They make a mess of flaying. The skin shrinks. Skins have many uses, the man at his shoulder said. with a voice that had learned hospitality by asking permission and not always getting it. "You do not approve of the girls' pets. I do not approve of anything that teaches men to mistake warmth for safety," Roose said. "We will wait. We will count. We will lend sharpness to whomever seems least like to put our wives in chains. If the north becomes a fire, we will not stand in front of it. We will stand behind and see who runs and who holds still." He set the letter aside in a way that said he had already memorized it. "Send a poor man with good manners to the rock," he said. "Tell them that the wolf looks up now when he walks. Tell them that we remain what we always were, men who dislike noise." At White Harbor, Wyman Manderley wrote down recipes and alliances in the same book because life rarely separated such things for any man. He watched the docks in the evening when the lamps along the quays made straight lines of light and remembered being a boy who had wanted one ship and gotten two and been greedy enough to think that meant he deserved three. He ordered fish salted for beasts that were not men and smiled when the crews protested, because he remembered that nobody learns to be generous without first resenting the size of his own hands. At Winterfell, Missandei sat with Luwin and compared the forms of numbers as if they were temples. "We call this arrangement a plate," she said, drawing with her reed pen the way a braid is drawn when you put down law. "3 strands, no one above the others, meant to be undone when you reach a certain knot." "It looks like winter rope," Luwin said, delighted. "We bind the doors with it when the wind wants to pretend it is a guest and push its way in. We have no word for undoing at a particular knot. We say spring." "Spring," she repeated and tasted it like bread. Ricardo walked the ice along the yard at Nightbeck. Oz men who came from places with wide horizons get hungry if given walls and no moon. He had learned the word for breath, ones that mattered, ones that did not, and had planted the syllables in his head like caches of water along a long ride. The shadow came while he was crouched with a small boy who had crept from his pallet without permission to see if wolves spoke a language he could learn. The boy had an apple. The dire wolf had an opinion. Ricardo made a small sound in his throat, the sound men used to tell horses they are not about to be asked to do anything, and that the person making the sound has noticed that they are beautiful. The boy repeated the sound, very serious. The dire wolf sneezed and set his head on the boy's knee. The shadow overhead was an agreement between fire and stone. Ricardo did not look up. A man can learn to accept that the world has more of itself than his childhood had prepared him for. He ate the other half of the apple and did not apologize. The Lannister slept in a bed that had been warmed by a pan as if he were a lady, and woke dreaming of chains that were not iron and doors that were not wood. He put his hand up to his scar and found it still there, which was a silly kindness. He lay and thought of the girl whose hair had been tugged from a brush and sent north like a prayer. He had not asked for that, but it lay in his pocket anyway, a weight that nothing would balance. Sansa lay in a bed too, and the Red Keep's bedchambers are not kind to dreams. She lay with her eyes open and watched the moon skitter across the wall, as if someone were playing with it in a different room. She made a list of things the girl she had been would have believed she needed to survive. Songs, dresses, glances. Then she made a list of what she knew now. Water, bread, a door that could be opened from the inside, a man with a ruined face who sometimes ran out of insults and spoke sense instead. She thought of a tree with a white trunk. She thought of hair. She did not cry, because tears here were either a weapon for someone else to use or a waste of salt. Arya learned to sleep on wagons that moved like bad ideas and to wake to the sound of boys breathing as if they were forest animals. Yoren snored as if to mock the watch's discipline. Hot Pie used the sort of language that was used up and replaced every morning like a baker's water. Gendry listened more than he spoke and watched Arya as if he had seen a knife behave itself and wanted to be sure she did not forget how to keep behaving. In a village where the houses had learned to hunch together against wind, a priest with red cloth around his throat spoke about fire as if he owned it. He said, "The old gods sleep because nobody has kept them fed." He said, "The new ones have gone south to look at themselves in mirrors." He said, "There are dragons and they are not metaphor." Arya spat into the dust and the dust accepted her offering without pride. She set a stick across her shoulder and kept walking and taught herself a new song that had nothing to do with anybody loving anybody else wrong and everything to do with not dying in a ditch. Ned and Caitlin lay down together because men who carry a house on their backs must remember to put it down sometimes, and because there were things about the day that could not be written in letters and must be recognized in the dark. "He is what he was," she said of Tyrion, careful, and he is not. That is all we can ask of any of us. "I will ask more," Ned said, not stubborn, not proud. "I will ask him to betray his house and bring me my girl. And I will ask the dragon scribe to teach my men the words that do not set fire to anything. And I will ask my boys to learn to put their boots on without being told. I will ask the gods to make the wind less clever. I will not be given all I ask, but I will ask." Caitlyn's hand went to the scar at his throat and lay there, not to measure it or to regret it, but to acknowledge it like any other piece of their furniture. "Ask me something," she said. "Bear it with me," he said. "I have been doing that all along," she answered, her mouth near his ear, the words as practical as folding a blanket. "Ask me something I can fail at. Turn your anger toward the men who earned it," he murmured. "Not the ones we love who will only be injured by it." She was silent for a breath and then another. "I will try," she said, and it was as binding a vow as any in their marriage. The dragon came at dawn like a memory of summer carried across a cold yard by a child who does not know how to ration. It flew lower over the forge, and the iron there sang as if happy to be remembered. Mikken lifted his head and smiled in a rude way at the sky, as if ready to jeer at it if it failed him, but it did not. It exhaled, and the breath went over the coals and made them bright without making them mad, and the men around the bellows laughed because they could feel the difference. "Less coal," Mikken muttered. Delighted in that precise way men are when an arithmetic problem turns out to be easy. "Hotter iron. I'll beat it into something that won't break on the first oath it's sworn to keep." "Beat a dozen of those," Wendell Manderly said. He had arrived with a train of flour and gossip, and patted his stomach as if all miracles should be edible. "We'll set them on the table with the pies and see which the South bites first." The South bit in its own way. The raven came with a ribbon tied to its leg that could only have been chosen by someone who did not think of ribbons as tools. The script on the letter was not the Boy King's hand, though it purported to be. It was a line of a woman who had taught herself to be precise and adored the skill too much. There were flourishes. There were words that had no need to be in the sentence and were there to make the sentence look well-fed. There was a warning that did not say its name and a suggestion that kings are giant children whose ois must be kept from other children at all cost. There was nothing about daughters and hair and dogs. Ned put it aside and sent for Missandei and Luwin and Tyrion, because sometimes convenience makes better court than pride. They read it, and one smiled, and one did not, and one looked as if his breakfast had not been as good as he had previously thought. "She is frightened," Missandei said in a voice that did not judge. "She has no words for that. So she is sending you the words she would use for anger instead." "Cersei's words are little barbs," Tyrion said. "No offense has too small a neck to not be offered a noose with her. She will make a show of sending a fellowship to fetch you to court and then be surprised when you do not saddle your horse. She will call the dragon a toy. She will practice speeches in the mirror. If your gods are merciful, the mirror will crack and save us some time." "While she practices," Luwin murmured, "we will count grain and give the smiths heart coals to play with and teach the men on the walls not to shoot at shadows and call them birds." They made Winterfell into a place where the new had somewhere to sit without being asked to eat first. Took more labor than victory, and there was something comforting in that. Men walked the walls with eyes that looked up more, and learned that necks could forgive them. The ladies of the kitchen set a pot near the newborns with a heart coal underneath and laughed because the air above it made the babies sleep as if the world had decided briefly to be kind. Boys learned to say the names of the dragons without making them into heroes and without making them into demons, but into neighbors, distant, very large, possibly noisy neighbors. At night Ned walked the line between his house and its gods and accepted that some nights the cold would get inside his boots and other nights it would not. He wrote small letters that were large things in the only handwriting that had the right to speak in both places. His. He sent one to the watch to tell his son that he was proud of him for not falling off the world when it had tried to shove him. He sent one to White Harbor to tell Wyman that the fish tasted better when salted for creatures that were not men, and did not ask if Wyman thought the same. He sent one to none of the 7 gods and most of the ones the trees did not need. He sealed none of these with the running wolf and sealed them all with it anyway because his blood could not help itself. When words were done and work was doing itself in other men's hands, he went down again to the crypts and stood before Lyanna because there are rooms a man must visit to keep his other rooms from becoming lies. He thought of the rose and the prince and the songs that had not been written because too many men had been busy dying. He did not swear to her that he would not bring fire into their winter. He swore only that he would put it where it warmed and not where it destroyed if he had hands that could so place it. He swore that when the choice came to burn a house or to knock and ask for bread, he would knock first. In the yard above, the dog the cook had tried to teach not to fight with the kitchen cat chose to sleep under the wagon Missandei's chest had come out of because sometimes loyalty is a matter of who is kind when a man is hungry. The braziers hissed and smiled. The dragon did not come that night. The stars did. They looked colder, and yet less concerned with hurting you. When morning came, it brought more men. They were not from the south, and their banners were not lions. They rode with a grimness that Winterfell recognized as a salutations, and their lord rode a horse that had learned that the rider and it would be friends whether or not it wished so. Rickard Karstark dismounted like a man who wanted to cut something that had not done him harm. He went to one knee because habit and respect had been put into him by a father who had taken pains to do so, and when he rose, he did not waste pleasantries. "If we are to stand against the south," he said, "I want to do it now so that we may be done with it before the snow thinks to make fools of us. If we are to feed children to dragons, I want to know their names. If we are to barter our honor for girls, I want to see the scales weighed in front of me." "You will have a chair in the room where it is done," Ned said. "You will have a cup. You will have a say." Karstark stared at him and then nodded abruptly, as if the shape of the next month had just been carved somewhere he could read it by touch. "Good," he said. "I am tired of supposing." "Supposing is a tired man's work," Wyman chimed in. He had arrived as if he had not, and brought with him 2 pies as if that would soften the sound of counsel. "Let us bake instead. It keeps the kitchen warm and gives men something to do with their hands when their minds want to fight." The pie cut yielded steam and meat and an aroma that made the dragon who had been sleeping on a ship bite the air with interest as far away as the harbor, and that made Missandei laugh because hunger is the one translation that never fails. Tyrion sat beside Roose, who had somehow entered the room like a thought on stockings, smooth and without noise. "You do not smile much," Tyrion observed. "Smiling makes men tell you things you do not need to know," Roose replied. "I prefer silence. Can be shaped." He turned his pale eyes on the dwarf and let them linger just long enough to be rude and then not. "Your house has never been a friend of ours." "My house has never been a friend of its own," Tyrion said, and took more pie than he needed because this might be the last time in a fortnight he could. "I do not judge men by their sigils, Lord Bolton. I judge them by whether their company makes me want to make myself smaller than I am." Roose blinked once. It might have been laughter if you had never known laughter and had to imagine it. Near Noel, with the air pretending to be generous and the stable boys emboldened enough by such pretense to whistle in the yard, a boy came up from the south gate leading a donkey that had the sense to be patient because it had not been asked to do anything yet. The boy's boots were tied with string, and the string was new. He asked for a cup of water and drank it with trouble. He had not had enough practice drinking before being looked at. He carried nothing, which is always suspicious in men who have come from a long way. When he opened his mouth, the first thing that came out was the noise a bird makes when it hits a window. "The city," he managed, as if embarrassed to have to say it at all. "The king, the small one, not the one who thinks he is very large. He asked me to carry a thing sewn into the shoulder of my coat. He said that if I did, I would not be hurt even if the city burned down. I did. He did not lie. I am here." They unpicked the cheap stitches and found a paper, thin as pride, screened with small words that were more like counts of beans than poetry. Ned read it and felt a side of his mouth, considering a smile and then choosing dignity. He handed it to Luwin, who read it and did smile, because he had earned the right to with this particular kind of cleverness. Tyrion, when he saw it, was careful not to show any recognition but could not help his hand's tiny movement toward his pocket where a similar count of promises lay folded as small as a child's hope. Sansa's name was not in it and did not need to be. It said, "The girl in the garden reads by the wall in the noon when the guard who dislikes his own day is made to stand near her by order of a florid man who fancies himself a negotiator." It said, "A baker who once came from the north may be a coward but can be convinced to weep properly at a certain hour." It said, "If a bird is to find the sky, the cage's door must be oiled until it forgets to squeak." "Doors," Ned said softly. He put the paper down and breathed and did not allow joy to disfigure his face. "Dragons will do what dragons will do. In the south, men will be asked to be honest against their better habits. We will do both, and while we do, we will keep our feet under us." He wrote with Luwin then in the afternoon until his hand cramped and his patience had been sharpened to a decent point. He wrote to the woman who had learned too much sense as a means of staying alive and told her nothing except that he saw her and believed she existed. He wrote to the boy who hid behind a crown and told him a story about a calf that had been blown into a ditch and had gotten out by not pushing so hard. He wrote to a man who wore no sigil and had too many spies and told him that the North remembered kindnesses even when it wanted to forget faces. He wrote to his son and told him about the way the dragon's breath had made the iron sing. And he wrote to his daughter with no address to put on the envelope and told her a joke about old Nan's ginger biscuits that would only make her laugh if she was allowed to laugh at all. Night came, and when it came, it was not a battle. It was a series of things men always do when they are waiting for battles that might be better and might be worse. A woman counted spoons. A man walked the wall and imagined he heard singing in the woods and then realized it was the wind teaching itself another trick. Boys whispered before sleep, and in their whispering was all the courage men later claimed they were born with. Dogs made loops of themselves to keep their paws warm. The dragon cut a line of heat through a cloud and then decided against coming lower. Far away, a girl turned a page and held a finger there, as if something might interrupt her and she did not wish to lose her place. And so the North slept, not trusting sleep but taking it when offered, the way a sensible man takes a wife who comes with a flock of sheep but a temper. They dreamed small dreams, of pies, of boots without holes, of the right amount of snow to make the yard look well-furnished and not cruel. They dreamed larger dreams, too, some of them, though they did not tell anyone in the morning. Of red leaves that did not fall, of white bark unmarked by axes, of girls who set down fear and picked up their names again, of men who made themselves less large to make room for other men to breathe. In Braavos, the young woman who had sent them heat sat with her map and her olives and her spine that had learned the shape of a chair and permitted it without growing lazy. She listened as Yora made a report with stubborn care. She listened as Missandei's letter from Winterfell was read, the words small and proud on the page, of heart coals and spoons and boys at the forge with iron that did not sulk, of a lord who wanted doors, of a dwarf who had chosen to be helpful in a manner that would make him an enemy to more dangerous enemies. She put her hand on the place on the map where the wolf lived and made a promise that no god would bother to witness and that no man could hold her to. "I will not burn what I do not need to burn," she said into a room that kept secrets well. "I will not mistake speed for direction. I will not confuse the sound of my own pride with the sound of a dragon's wings. I will be the queen who learns and then acts, not the queen who acts and then demands the world call it learning." The Titan outside roared as it sometimes did when the fog rolled a certain way and made men cling to stories. She did not flinch. She had learned to take noise as a good sign. It meant the world was still not done with itself. At the wall, the old bear sat with a cup that had forgotten how to keep heat and considered the shell his boy had set on his table that morning. "We will write to no one about this," he said, which meant of course that he already had in his head a list of 4 men he would hint to who might hint to someone else who might speak to someone who would carry the word to someone Os ear he actually wanted, and then he would deny having said anything and that would make the word true. "If dragons are to flit around our wood like sparrows," he added, scratching under his coat with ferocious concentration, We will take it as a compliment that they think we have wood worth flitting in." John laughed, and the laugh tasted of something old and something new. "I'll tell Ghost to be polite," he said. "He's the one who would take offense if a shadow that large dropped over his antler stash. Your wolf is the only polite thing north of this wall," Mormont said crossly. "And even he stares at me as if I were dinner he could be talked out of if I behaved." "We should be so easily persuaded," John said. Night drew its line, and men crossed it to sleep and crossed it again in the morning to work. Missandei stood in the yard and taught a boy how to write the dragon's name with a pen made from a reed that had grown where no dragons had ever walked. The boy made the letter wrong twice and then got it right and smiled as if he had worshipped something and been given leave to eat it. Ricaro whittled wood into the shape of a horse and then was displeased by the horse's legs and shaved it down into something that might later be a dog. And a dog came and sniffed at it and gave him a pass. Tyrion sat with Wyman and planned a dinner that would leave men too happy to start a fight and a conversation that would leave them too thoughtful to end one. Bolton sat with himself and planned nothing except to be near when other men made the mistake of thinking plans were the same as outcomes. Karstark argued with his own sons out in the yard and found that he did not mind losing because losing proved he had raised men. Ned sat with Catelyn on the low stone by the moat and watched the thin skin try to form over the water and get broken by the pipe's constant, unreasonable warmth. "This is the shape of it," she said. "Heat under, cold over, the surface always wrong. The only time it will be right is when it is finally frozen hard. Or when it is finally melted," he said, never quite able to stop himself from being contrary when contradiction reminded him he was alive. They listened to ducks because ducks are honest as far as birds go. They watched two squires practice with swords too big for them because too big swords have a way of reminding boys they have wrists. They did not speak of Sansa for a while because sometimes not saying a name is the way to keep it near without breaking it. When they did speak, it was simply, "She will walk in a garden at noon," Catelyn said. "The dwarf asked us to make a baker weep. I will find a man who knows how to cry in such a way that a door forgets to notice what passes behind it," Ned said. "We will not owe him less for the skill than we owe a man who makes steel ring true under a dragon's breath. I wish we had never had to learn what debts to keep in this world. We did not get to choose our merchants," she said. "Only our account keeping." She took his hand and allowed them both a moment of sentiment before the day, embarrassed to find them idle, brought something else to demand their attention. That something else was not war. It was a flock of birds rising all at once from the gods' wood like a thought the tree had sent out to test the weather. It was a woman falling in the yard and being caught by another woman before she hit the ground because most of the men had not looked up in time. It was a piece of iron coming from the forge shaped like the idea of a blade and making even Roose say, "Ah," because there is a point at which utility and beauty shake hands without either admitting it. It was Missandei writing the words plate and spring on a slate and watching Bran sound them out and make the right face when he got them the third time. It was Theon looking toward the west and pretending he did not know the direction of the sea by the pull in his blood, and then remembering that he did not have to pretend in Winterfell and letting his mouth soften in a way that made him look like a boy robbed of toys and not a man loaned to wolves. It was a donkey braying at the south gate and a man with honest mud on his boots saying he had seen a girl with hair like a good fire lift the hem of her skirt to avoid a puddle, and a man with a singing sword laugh at a joke nobody else would have made. It was a raven bursting into the rookery as if chased by a thing with 3 heads and then calming at Luwin's whistle as if remembering that it was, after all, only a bird with errands. And when night came again, as it always did, it brought the quiet that lives when men are brave enough to let themselves have it. Fires burned down to proper coals. The dragon did not fly. The stars did not. Far off, something large remembered the way to Winterfell and did not come because someone had told it not to. Near at hand, something small remembered the way to a garden and did not go because someone had told her not to. Both obeyed for now. Such obedience was a form of patience, and patience was the one commodity the North had always had more of than the South. It sat with them at table and in the yard and even in the Godswood, which had never pretended to be interested in men's ideas. It would be spent. Of course it would. Everything was. But for now it was stacked in the larders with the onions, and knotted at the ends of ropes, and hung to dry with the ducks. For now it was enough to make a story continue. far better minds than theirs had failed to do that. In the red, Keep a Queen stood at a mirror and told herself a tale about how winter kept to its proper places. In Bravos, a girl who was a queen by stubbornness as much as birth put down her pen and allowed herself to sleep without maps and dream without ships. At the Wall, an old man decided not to die that day because he disliked giving snow the satisfaction. In a ditch, a man whose name was not worth the ink it Wowell. Take to write it sucked on his fingers and tasted ash and thought, there are dragons. He did not make it into a hope or a fear. He made it into a fact he could carry like a coin. And at Winterfell, the heart tree watched nothing and everything with eyes that had once been made by knives and were tired of men. And the pool held the stars with the same carefulness it would hold fire if fire ever humbled itself enough to float. The gods kept their own counsel, which is to say they were trees and water and wind, and the men walked in and out under them with letters and plans and bowlfuls of stew and did not know, and did not need to know, whether that counsel was for or against them. If there were dragons, there were also ducks. If there were kings, there were also old women who knew how to bind sprained wrists with clean cloth and scold boys for forgetting to dry their boots. There were husbands who asked difficult things and wives who agreed to fail at what they did not know how to promise. There were wolves who could be persuaded to let children keep apples. If the South thought the North had changed beyond recognition because a shadow had written a line of heat across its sky, the South had not learned the North at all. It was as it had been, and it was becoming something else at the same time. This is what living things do. It would do so a little longer until someone rang a bell no one could ignore, and then all these careful preparations, these heart coals and letters and pies, these courtesies and the right silences, would be called upon to hold up a weight too large for anyone to envy. Until then, it was snowing lightly, and the boys had discovered that if you held a heart coal in your mitten and ran across the yard, you could make a thin ribbon of steam trail behind you like a banner. The men pretended not to be amused. The women did not pretend. Ned stood at a window and watched his sons fog the air with small red-brown flags that melted irrelevant amounts of white. He laughed once, and the laugh made his shoulders look less like stone. He let the worry sit in the corner where worry always sits and allowed a different feeling to come toward him. The dangerous, generous thing that men in his position get stingy with because it feels like a luxury. The sense that, for a few breaths, the world might be possible to carry. He took those breaths. He allowed himself that indulgence. He put his hand on the glass and felt the heat from the spring and the cold from the yard and thought, not making promises, not asking the trees for anything, only thinking, hold. He thought it like an order and like a prayer. He thought it like a father.